Welcome everyone. My name is Dave McCauley, and on behalf of the entire Incubator team, I'd like to welcome you to the latest episode in the Incubator Think Tank webinar series. Today's topic will focus on website security. Incubator founder and CEO Sujal Raju will be your host for today. Sujal has spent the last 2 decades creating successful digital solutions for multiple industries and clients. Sujal founded Incubator 10 years ago with the goal of finding new and creative ways to solve complex web and mobile challenges for all of Incubator's clients. 2 quick things to let you know of. First, if needed, there will be a full recording of this webinar available next week. We will be posting it on YouTube, and we will send each of you a link to that video once it's all ready. And next, we encourage you to ask any questions you might have along the way. Please feel free to submit your questions during the presentation. We may interrupt Sujal along the way for a quick question or two, or we'll also have a Q&A period at the end of this presentation. Jada Montenegro, from our marketing team will be on hand to help out with your questions. Incubator is a one-stop shop for web and mobile development, hosting, and complete responsive support. Sitefinity is one of the many content management systems out there, but it is one of the best. Incubator researched many content management systems. Sujal, having developed his own CMS early in his career, chose Sitefinity as Incubator's CMS of choice. Incubator is proud of all of our highly respected clients across multiple industries. We value our client partnerships and strive to always find the best solution for each client's unique situation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Sujal Raju to take you through the rest of today's talk.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks everyone for joining us. I think I'm going to try to keep this presentation as casual as possible. And as Dave mentioned, if anyone has any questions as we go through different topics, feel free to put it in the chat. And I think Jada or Dave will let me know what those questions are. So let's get started. So in this webinar, when you talk about website security, I feel like there's a lot of components that you don't see. So if a website gets compromised or defaced or any of that, the reason is not just because the website itself was not secure. I mean, it's definitely one of the reasons, but I think all of the reasons that you see on the screen right now do play a factor. So it's the CMS user who has the administrative capabilities or other capabilities to log in and manage the site, the browser that they use, their computer, the account management, the CMS, of course, and then how securely the data is stored, both when it's transitioning from the user's computer where they submit it into the server, or once it's in the server and gets stored, how is it being stored? And lastly, like the hosting security, which is the server and the infrastructure that's housing your website and how secure that is. And finally, I think with website hacking or any of that becoming more and more sophisticated, we should always have what we call as a business continuity and disaster recovery plan in case something happens. And it doesn't have to be just if a website gets compromised, but also, let's say if a power outage happens, like it happened in 2003 or 4, I believe, or any other reason that you would have to have a site or a communication plan that happens and is available in case something were to happen to your main site. Let's say if it went down due to an infrastructure power outage or some other natural disaster or website security reasons. So like I said, the website security revolves or is in the center, but everything else that has to be in place properly in order for that security to be in place intact is all of the things that we talked about. So what we're going to do is look at each one of these in general and discuss the different things of how we can make sure that what we can do in our part to make sure that the websites that we manage are secure. So first we'll get into the CMS user and personal computer security. This is for anyone that is managing the site. let it be the IT administrator, the IT developer, manager, whoever has access to the hosting environment, but also your project managers, your CMS content authors, designers, anyone who has access to the site. And the reason is if any of your files or your computer gets compromised, it is possible that someone is either watching or have infected any files that you may upload to the site. So it's paramount that you make sure that you always run some kind of a virus or a malware scanner. One of the popular ones that gets shipped with Windows operating system itself is the Windows Defender. But likewise, in Mac or anything, you could use any of the softwares that we've listed here, but there are several in the market. But you should use something and make sure periodically, maybe once a month, once a week, just make sure that it's running fine and it's up to date with its virus definitions. So just another step to be cautious in terms of if you were to get a file or someone is trying to get into your computer, that these softwares stop them from happening. The next is browser security. So talking about the user's computer, one important factor is the browser security, because that's how you interact with your website. Most applications now have site administration that is also online, so you don't have to actually download or install a software to manage your site, but it's all done through your browser. So what can we do to make sure that the browser itself is secure? The first thing that we're going to talk about is the URL. So you would have seen that any website that you go to, at the top, you see the URL or the link that you're trying to view right now, right? And this is very important to understand, the format of that text that you're seeing in that box. The first part that you see over here is the HTTPS or HTTP. I think HTTP is no longer a secure protocol, in the sense that if you were to access a site with just HTTP, the site owner should automatically redirect you to HTTPS nowadays. And the reason for that, we're going to discuss that a little bit later, but that ensures that whatever you're typing or whatever you're interacting on that website, everything is being encrypted from the point of your computer, your browser, all the way to the server. So if anyone was eavesdropping on that traffic, they are not able to see what it is, because it's not plain text. The next part that's very important is to note what is a domain name and what is a top level domain. And it is always, as you can see here, the last part of that first segment that you can see. I don't know if you can see my the mouse pointer, but this is the last part of the segment, and that's very important, because the part before that is what's called as a subdomain, and that actually allows you to have as many dots or periods, if you will, in front of it. What I mean by that is that look at this URL right here. You might think that you're on the bankofamerica.com website, but really it is not, because if you see here, all of this is actually a subdomain of this particular site, and they have cleverly put in some just little bit of characters so that you think that you're actually on the Bank of America's website. So just be very cautious of that and understand how to read a URL. So like I said, the last part of that first segment is what's called as a top level domain. And these are much more than just com, .org, and .net. They've actually opened up to several top level domains. So just be aware of that. The next part is the site that you're actually going to. So google.com or cnn.com or any of that. So that's what you have to pay attention to. And then the first part is the subdomain. So note that before your domain, or how to note that is like you should have two periods or at least one. So if you have only one, then you have, then it actually tells you exactly what site you're visiting. But if you have more than one, that means that it is using a subdomain, and subdomain can have as many number of periods in them and as many characters that that a subdomain could have. So just be aware to look at the last part of this URL. And then anything after that is actually the subfolders. and directories that a website has. So it could have as many characters and slashes and it could be very long. But you want to pay attention to the first part. So make sure that you are on an HTTPS website, and also making sure that the domain, verifying that the domain that you're on is the domain that you think that you're on. So otherwise, and when someone is trying to mask a URL like this, it's actually called the URL spoofing. So if you've heard of that terminology, that's what that is. All right, moving on to the next topic. This is an example of, and this is a real example of a Bank of America website, which is actually not a Bank of America website. If you look up in Google, you can see this one. And if you look up fake Bank of America website, there's images of this. But this is where typically you would get an email, and the email would say that, hey, someone has compromised your account, and you should log into Bank of America site right now to change your password. And usually it'll have a link that says click here to log in and change your password. Now, what happens is we all in a hurry, because the message itself is a bit scary, saying that someone has compromised. You're going to click on that and not realizing that you're actually not on the Bank of America website. So what I recommend is, if you get any messages like that, what you should do is never click on the actual links that are in the email, but visit the website directly. Go to the site directly and look for any indications of a real compromise, because what will happen is each of your bank sites or your account should have what's called as an inbox of some sort, where it will tell you that, hey, we did notice an incident, and here is the, here's where you can check what to do or what happened. Also, you could call the number if you know the bank's number or behind your credit card, and call that number. Never call a phone number also that's mentioned in your email. Because again, that phone number may not be the actual Bank of America website, even though it could be an 1-800 number or a toll-free number. Never trust those if they come in the email, but call your bank directly from your regular main line and confirm that the message that you got. Next, here is an example of what's called as phishing. Phishing is an exercise where people are trying to get you to open a door into your computer, or maybe trying to make you open your account or give them your user ID and password. So this is an actual example, or I would say, again, an example that you can easily find on Google, but it's actually happened to the chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, where they got an email like this, and it actually tells you, and if you read the content, it says, someone just used your password. And it looks very authentic because it has the colors and the design scheme that Google uses, has all the information, and actually shows you that, hey, someone did log in from Ukraine, which you would think like, okay, you know what, it's possible that that's happened. And then it again has a link that you click on, change password. Same thing happens. You click on that link and you're taken to a site that looks like Google, but it isn't Google. And then the moment you put in your user ID and password, they have it. And they have been they've gotten very sophisticated in that as well. So when you do put your user ID and password, they will automatically redirect you in the backend to the Google's website at that moment. So you might get an error message on Google's website, which you might feel like, okay, you know what, maybe I didn't type my password correct, and then type it again. So you won't even know that you did this, because what happens is, like, you've gone to a site, you typed in the actual user ID and password, clicked on sign in, and it actually records that in their computer and then sends you back to the Google website all seamlessly. And then you see a message that says that, hey, log in again. So you feel like maybe you didn't type the password correctly, but at that moment it's too late. They already have your password. But if anything like this happens, you don't have to get worried. Right away, change the password of that account that you feel that you may have given it out. So just change the password right away. So that's the example of email phishing. This is usually done through emails, because email is something that's wide open for anyone to send you emails, and that's why if you see the IT administrator set up indicators in your email program that says that, hey, this email is coming from the outside, so just be cautious if you click on any link. So that's one of the reasons. But this is very, very difficult to identify what is a genuine email, what is not. So the recommendation is simply not to click any links that are coming into the email, but rather just go to the website and then try to get to where you want to be. So I mentioned that, the difference between HTTP and HTTPS. So basically, the reason, or I would say, if you go back in history, all the sites used to use HTTP protocol, and then only if you were to buy something or provide some secure information that they would change the site back to an HTTPS just while you're filling that form, and then switch you back to an HTTP site. But clearly, that's not a good practice, because it's possible that a developer might make a mistake and some portion of the secure site could be exposed via HTTP, and unknowingly your site visitor could provide some information that could be eavesdropped and taken a look at. And it's very simple. If you use an HTTP website, your network administrator or your ISP or someone between your computer and all the way to the the website that you're visiting, there are so many places that someone can take a look at the traffic and see what's going on. So it's always you to be careful and make sure that you're visiting an HTTPS website. And how that works is basically your browser, even before you start accessing an HTTPS website, indicates to the website saying that, hey, I'm so and so, and I'm trying to access your website. The HTTPS makes the website actually give it out what's called as a public key, and the browser then uses that public key to encrypt everything. And from there on, your browser and the website server, anything that's happening is only between those two, because if anyone were to eavesdrop, they wouldn't make any sense out of what was encrypted, because usually the algorithm strength for those is pretty high. The other thing you want to do is, like you mentioned, taking a look at the URL. The other thing you could do is, because you're visiting an HTTPS website, you should normally see a padlock right next to it. You can click on it, and just because that is there does not mean that you're on the right site still. Obviously, URL, like this is the correct site, because you can see there is no other subdomain or anything like that. So this is you're pretty sure that this is the correct site. But even so, what you could do is always click on the padlock and click on the certificate details, and then you should see what it is issued to. And if you see that, over here it says it's issued to www.bankofamerica.com. But if this was a fake website or a URL that was spoofed, you will see that the issued to would be the different domain that it was issued to. So just be careful about that as well. So that's another way you can be cautious about what you're visiting. The other thing that you want to be careful about on your browser is what type of extensions you install on it. Whether you're keeping your browser up to date, you will notice that both Google Chrome, Firefox, or I would say even Microsoft Edge Chromium, the new one for that matter, have all made the updates very seamless, meaning it lets you know, or in most parts can actually automatically install those updates. So make sure you watch out for those and keep those updates or keep your browser up to date, because exploits are always done or are a common thing nowadays. So and browsers have to stay on top of that and patch those exploits and any vulnerabilities to make sure that the browser is secure. Extensions, like I mentioned, extensions are again some third-party programmer or a company that's putting these out in the web store, and these typically can actually see what's happening on your as you visit websites. And a screenshot here is again for some of these fake extensions that claim that they were actually an ad blocker, but essentially what they're doing is they're tracking you through cookies and getting information about your activity. So make sure that you don't have any extensions on your browser that you don't trust, even if they claim to be an ad blocker. If it is something that you're familiar with, then that's fine. But other than that, make sure that you're not running any extensions or plugins on your browser that you don't trust. So make sure that you don't have them. If you have them, just uninstall anything that you're not using, because usually the plugins can actually see your activity as you're going through between sites if you have allowed it. And that's a cause. I mean, I would say that that's possibly one of the reasons that someone could see what activity you're doing on the website or websites in that matter. Next, we'll talk about account security. Account security deals with how you interact with a website that is secure. So most websites usually had, or traditionally had just user ID and password. So if you had a user ID and password, you could log in, and that was enough to identify you on that site. But many sites now realize that user IDs and passwords could be easily compromised. So what they have done now is allowed you another way of providing what's called as a multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication simply means that it's going to authenticate you at least at two levels, which means that user ID and password could be one of them. The second could be your phone, where it sends you a message and you type in a code from that, or just sends you a sign-in request again on your phone that you can just click on approve, like the Duo request or the Google Authenticator, and there's a lots more. The third we're going to talk about is actually the password, and then also the contact information. I'm actually going to go deeper on these. So multi-factor authentication, like I talked about, it's something that you have in possession, which is your phone, but it's again different from the actual browser that you could be browsing. The next is the knowledge of the user ID and password, so something that you know, which is there. And also these could be the security questions beyond just the user ID and password. So some good websites that are secure or follow strict security guidelines, if you notice, also tracks which computers that you log into their site from. So if they notice that you're logging in from a different computer than you normally do, they'll then ask you more questions that you might know, that you might have set up. So that way they can identify you. And the third being biometrics that can confirm that you have. So most CMSs have that, and if you don't, you should definitely encourage people to use it and add that to your website security. Account security is this is dealing with passwords, and this is probably the one that we ignore the most, right? Most of the times you have the same password, or maybe use a calendar month or something like that, which is easily guessable, or you may be using the same password on multiple sites. So the things that you can do, and even though it's probably painful, is to make sure that you make it impersonal, because things could be guessed easily based off your date of birth or something that someone knows. So you want to make it as impersonal as possible. Make it long, because when someone is trying to guess what your password is through a computer, they're running through very sophisticated algorithms that are running through different combinations really fast. So if you make it a very long password, then it makes that combinations of trial to be very big. So you make it much harder for someone to guess your password. Next is to make it diverse, which is simply saying that don't use the same password on different sites. The reason for that is, and you would have noticed, a lot of banks or other service providers have their websites compromised, and that what that usually means is that they say that your password may have been visible to these external people. And with that, now it makes it very easy for them to take that user ID and password and try it on some of the most popular sites. So they know that you must have a bank, and what about which bank are most popular. They're going to try and log in using that same user ID and password in those sites, or your Gmail, or something like that. So making sure that they're diverse is important for that reason. And making it different, like I talked about, it's the same thing. So moving on. There is a lot of password managers around. There are some that are inbuilt into your browser. So if you want to use that, or you could also use third-party password managers. And what they do is they actually generate the password for you. That's pretty long, and obviously you can't remember that, but there is no need for you to remember that, because what you could do is use that browser to actually put that password in for you. So that way, it basically takes care of making sure these passwords are unique and long for each site. So even if that particular site's IT department or the IT infrastructure gets compromised, and if that password is exposed, it's really not a password that you use anywhere else. And if you change the password, then then that becomes a non-issue, because they can't do much with that password because that's not valid anymore. And you can easily Google for the password managers on Google, and try to find the best password managers and pick one if you like, or you could use the ones that come in the browser. Next one, I'm not sure how many of you have heard of this. It's called the SIM card hijacking. And with the multi-factor authentication, these hackers have got, again, very sophisticated. So they know that you could have a multi-factor authentication, and mostly probably using your phone number as that second part of authentication, which means that sites that send you an SMS message to verify that it's you. So what happens here is that a hacker, usually through a website, tries to get your account details, and then they call you from, just pretending to be calling from Verizon or pretending to call from one of the service providers, and asks you some information because they know enough information about you. So they'll say, hey, we know that you live here. This is fine, but we need your SIM card number, let's say. So never give out your SIM card number unless you're actually at the physical location if you can. But if you are online working with your T-Mobile representative, then make sure that you have called T-Mobile and reached out to them. Because once they get that SIM number, they can then call your provider, whether it's Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, and call them up and then swap that SIM into their phone. Right, so they can call, give them all the information they need and say like, hey, I got a new phone and I want you to swap the SIM card to this phone. And once that happens, what will happen is that you will stop getting phone calls and not realize that that's what has happened. In the meantime, the hacker is now using your phone to contact your bank and confirming that it's them or it's you, and then trying to basically log into the site and hacking that site and causing damage that way. So this is another thing that we have to be aware of, that we should be careful about, making sure that we are aware and we never give out SIM card information to the outside people. Next, we're going to talk about website CMS configuration, and the CMS configuration starts with making sure that all your sites do use an SSL certificate. SSL certificate is the one that verifies the organization, the ownership of the domain. So they are not issued to anyone that does not own the domain. And the other thing is, with that certificate, you can then obviously verify that this domain is yours, you own it. And the second part you're letting the browser know is the keys that you provide. So like I had mentioned earlier, when you have the HTTPS turned on for your website, you basically now are saying that, hey, if you want to interact with our website, it will be on an encrypted line. So when the browser contacts the website first, a public key is given by your site, and using that public key, it's kind of like if you have gone to a safety deposit box at a bank or a security deposit box, you know how they have two keys. This is what that is. So that in order to do anything with the site, you need those two keys to look at. And without the keys, no one in between, even if you are anywhere in between these lines of communication, they can't eavesdrop and be able to find out what exactly is happening. Now, there is another possibility that if you've heard, the TLS protocols, 1.0, 1.1, now 1.2, these were also less secure before the 1.2 and 1.1. So it was advised that all the sites use what's called as a TLS 1.2. And for the most part, all sites now use at least TLS 1.2. And basically what that was is like the encryption keys that were used are much more difficult to hack now. And the combinations that someone would have to do is just astronomical. So it's very hard for someone to hack a website. But the other thing you could do is that the SSL certificate that you have, what you could do is reduce the lifetime. So if you notice, Google Chrome and some of the other browsers have forced that each website should now have their lifetime for not more than 1 year. At Incubator, our practice is to actually keep it only for 90 days or less. So every 90 days, we automatically issue a new certificate and install that. So that way, if a key gets compromised for whatever reason, it's not compromised for too much of a time, or it does not allow someone a longer period of time to try different combinations to guess what the key is. So we reduce the lifetime, or that is a good practice to make sure that the SSL certificate lifetime is as small as possible. Next is the CMS itself. You have to make sure that the patches, just like the browser or your operating system, your CMS is also critical. So you have to make sure that all the patches, when they're released by your CMS vendor, that they are installed and you stay up to date. Because if there was any vulnerabilities that were discovered, and if they were patched, that way you have those patches and your site is secure. Next thing that many people ignore is also the audit of the users that are in your CMS, the groups and roles and permissions that you have assigned. If you have a larger group that's managing your site, you want to have an audit done by your team periodically, whether it's however frequent. The frequency could be anything that's you're comfortable comfortable with. But whether it's like monthly ones or per quarter or weekly, whatever best suits you. But take a look at who has access, who has inactive accounts, who has active accounts, whether the email addresses of these user accounts are really what they are. So in case if someone changed it and that you're not aware of, and someone is trying to get in, that could be a indicator that you want to review that particular account. The other is you want to look at any kind of privilege creep. So which means that if you had given someone administrative access for a temporary moment of time, but you forgot to take it back, then it can expose those, and you could take those administrative rights back from a user that doesn't need administrative access. The other things that you can do is make sure that any of the users that are changing roles, you can give them different kind of access based on their new role. So that will also help you. So it's important that you do an audit trail on the user permissions and user accounts in your CMS. Next is something that you have to be very careful as well. It's very common for websites to use a lot of plugins and players and other chat softwares or tracking mechanisms or other things that you get code for, right? From these vendors, you'll get a code and they'll say like, take this code and simply put it on your website, either in the header section or in the footer section of your site, and that's enough. Well, you got to pay attention to that, what they're giving, and make sure that everything is looks good to you, or get it reviewed from your developer or your support team. Because what happens is, like, if they were to inject a code into your site, literally you're giving someone else insight to whatever is happening on your site. So for example, if someone were to give a URL and that was unfortunately hacked, or someone gave you something, it allows that code to be executed on your site visitors browser, and actually allows them to, let's say, do keyboard logging, so they can actually log anything that's being typed, or it can actually insert some code into your site where if someone thinks that, I'm on the Bank of America's website and there is a user ID and password login, but really it was injected by this code that you embedded. And now anything that you type in here, even though you are on the right website, even though everything looks good, now the site visitor could be typing something in where it's now getting into the wrong hands. So you have to be very careful with any kind of plugins that you use on your site. And many of the open source CMSs, that's the problem with that, because you have these marketplaces that you can go in and get software that you can use for your website. But the problem is, if you do use them, you have no idea how it's interacting with your website. And there have been several leaks, you can read about them on Google, of cases where someone used a plugin and that caused havoc on their website. And you wouldn't know anything happened because it's more affecting the site visitors, right? And you wouldn't even know that activity is happening on your site. Next is the data storage, security, and processing. And I'm just going to talk real quick on these two. This is talking about what happens to the data as you're interacting with the website. So there's two I would say, stages or statuses of your data. One is as soon as you have clicked on the submit button after you have typed something, that information is now being sent over to the server. So that's called that's what is called as data in flight, meaning it's in transition from your browser to the server. And for that is the HTTPS protocol that's important, because that's ensuring that while it's in transitioning from your computer all the way to the server where the website is, that the information is encrypted. So we talked about that to keep, make sure that all your sites always use HTTPS. The next is what is called as data at rest. So once the information reaches on the server of the website owner, that information is then stored usually in a database or some other kind of file structure, things like that. And what you want to do is make sure that if it is some information that's secure, that it is encrypted, right? And the encryption has several flavors of it. So the two main flavors is what's called as creating a hash. And the hash is simply used, or the terminology stands for something where if they encrypt the data, you can never get back the data. All it means is it's going to give you a signature, and you can verify the signature to say that, hey, is this the data that we typed, right? So this is commonly used for the password. And this is probably a good practice for anyone who's developing software, or if you have a team that's developing software for you, to make sure that the passwords that they're using is actually stored as a hash, which means that no one, even the software administrator or the developer, can't see what their password is, because the only thing that they can see is a hash. And the hash verification works in this way, is that if the same person comes back and types that same password, another hash is created and both of them are matched to see if the signature matches. So that's how secure it is, like, because no one can actually see what it is, even if they get access to what's stored. The next is the type of information that someone has to see. For example, let's say your social security number for a healthcare website. So once you have filled up a form and you have submitted it, someone at the hospital may need to see it to process your registration or something of that sort. So even for that, what has to be done is keys have to be created where only the application knows how to get the data out of that encryption. So it's not necessarily a hash, but it's an encrypted text that only the application that requires it can access. So even if a system administrator logs into the server and takes a look at the data, they can't do much with it. But only if you have access to the application and you have the proper permissions in that application is how you can actually get that data and query that data. So that's what is called as data at rest. So you have to make sure, like, some of you might be marketing managers and may not be technical, but you can at least challenge your IT team to make sure that, hey, you just developed this, could you verify that the data in flight is secure, and also if the data at rest is secure, and what kind of encryption are you using? So I hope that helps you understand that. Next is the hosting security. So hosting obviously is where your website is stored, the server, the network firewall, everything that's involved, database server, anything that's revolves in keeping the website live, DNS server, and all of that comprises of the IT infrastructure that your website needs. Now, there are many things that you could use to protect your website, and websites attack also happen in several different ways. There's the ones that you may have heard of, where it's denial of service attack, it's called. And what that is like someone sends so much traffic to your website from different computers that your website is no longer able to handle the traffic. And what they're doing is they've created these bots or worms that are installed on so many people around the world in their computers, and they don't realize that that's happening. So at a specific time, all of those could be instructed to send traffic to one particular website. So they're all coming from different parts of the world. It's not just coming from one website, and it's very difficult to just identify those and stop it. So that's what is a denial of service attack. Next is the open door scanning. So if you have your website available, obviously you want people to get to it. So because of that, you have to open what's called as a port or a door so that people can access your website. And so you have to make sure that your IT team has only opened the specific ports that are needed and everything else is blocked off. And the separation of server resources is also very important. And that also avoids, if one server is handling multiple things, the chances of interaction increases. But if one server did only one thing, then again, you're limiting the activity or the ports that it needs to interact with. So that helps you as well. And that's all done through what's called as a firewall, which is right here. It basically stands at the outside of your network infrastructure. So basically any traffic that comes from the outside goes through it, and only if it allows it is allowed to interact with the website. And that's where you can set a lot of policies to say that, hey, which kind of traffic you want to allow. And over there, you have a lot of features that you can activate. And again, depends on what your IT team is using. But the most common one let me see if I have, okay. So the most common one is the intrusion detection and the intrusion prevention that you should have. What these are very smart algorithms that actually looks at the traffic, and even what seems to the eye as a valid traffic, it can detect a pattern. So let's say you may have uploaded a zip file or a picture to your website, thinking that, hey, everything looks good, and you upload the picture. It can detect the actual digital signature of that picture and identify that, hey, does it have some kind of malware in it, and actually detect it and actually stop that from even getting to the website. So when you use a firewall as part of your network security, make sure that you do have something in place for intrusion detection and intrusion prevention. It's well known as IDS or IPS. So make sure that's there on your side. Next, we're going to talk about what you've heard, I guess, very frequently nowadays, and what's called as a ransomware. And most recently, you would have heard about that pipeline company that was supplying gas, and they got infected from a ransomware as well. So in a way, here we're going to look at how that happens. So a ransomware usually starts with a malware that's received as a spam or an email, and we looked at a few examples of that earlier. And you feel like it's a genuine email, or it could be an email from your president or someone that you feel like, okay, you know what, I have to open this, and it will look very genuine, right? And you will try to open that Word document or an Excel or open up a zip file, any of those, and as soon as you open that gets installed on your site. Now, once it's there, just because you've opened it, it can actually download a malicious file that you are not aware of. And secretly it stays there so that you don't basically, like if something were to happen at that time, you may not realize that, hey, or you might get cautious. So what they do is they simply keep it on your computer installed or waiting for a certain time period where it can basically start up and start causing harm to your files. So what it does is basically it starts looking at the files or folders and starts encrypting those files with a key. And then it usually puts a file into that folder saying that, hey, if you want to decrypt these files, then you would have to pay us. And the rest of the story. So again, starts with, that's why website security or security in general starts in different phases, and you have to be making sure that you take care of all of those. Next, having a business continuity or a disaster recovery document or a plan. This has several steps involved, and we'll be more than happy to help you create one of these. But you should have what's called as a business impact analysis, which tells you like, hey, if this was the type of attack, or if this was the natural disaster that happened, what things will be impacted? Like what services will we not be able to offer? And things like that. So you should have that documented, and based off that, then you can create a contingency plan as well as a crisis communication plan. So say like, hey, if this happens, how are we going to communicate to the users that are affected, and tackle it that way. And then have a develop a recovery strategy. Again, same thing, based on what impact it has, what is the impact and what you can do. And then also have maintenance. So just because you have created this plan, the disaster recovery plan or continuity plan, doesn't mean that you're done. You should revise it either every 6 months or as frequently as you can, or at least once a year, to make sure that that plan is still valid. Another thing that you can do is to make sure that you have what's called as an alternate website. So you can have a fully functional website, which is also available. And what that means is that almost every website should use what's called as a continuous integration, which means the code is actually somewhere else in a repository. So at any given time, you can easily deploy it to a new server and have the entire site running as it was running on the site that was compromised or the server that was compromised. And the data should also be restored, can be restored from backups. So what happens is, like, if something happens, you can activate this fully functional website. It does take a little bit of time because the code has to be sent out to the server that was waiting, acting as an alternate emergency site. And then also the data has to be restored from the database backups. So let's say from yesterday or whichever date that you think was safe to restore from, and reviewing that, hey, this data that you're going to restore is valid and it's not the one that was compromised. So it takes a little bit of time, but you can get a fully functional website running, and that way the service is not interrupted too much. But the problem is that it does take a little bit of time. And the second option is that you have a lighter website, an emergency website. And what that is, like, it has the design that complements your brand, and it can also be running simultaneously, because what it is when we say a light website is that it only has the required information that you feel is necessary for that temporary time that you need for bringing your full website back up. And so this could allow you to communicate during that time. So if you want to post some messages, you could do that. And also it could have some links. So let's say to the online bill pay that could be running on a different site. So things like that, whatever you think are necessary for the operation of your organization, you could have those links on this website, but it may not have all the content and all the latest updates that you have on your fully functional website. And another idea could be to have a hybrid approach, which means that you do have an emergency light website, but you also have the fully functional website. So which means that you activate the emergency light website immediately as soon as you realize something has happened. And then while that's running, work on the fully functional website on a different server and get that restored. And that way, you can switch from the emergency light website to the fully functional website from another server, as soon as you can. So that covers that. And I think Dave and Jada, I'm going to open it up at this point to any questions that someone may have.
Yes, Sujal, thank you very much. Sujal, we're going to keep you on the screen there for some questions.
Okay.
And Jada's here to help out as well. Jada, what have we got for Sujal for today's Q&A?
Sure. So I'll just pick a couple questions here. One of them, what says, VPNs can be a great option for individuals to protect their website browsing activity and identity. Does a VPN offer any protection against email spoofing or bogus website URLs?
That's a good question. So for those of you who may not understand how the VPN works, VPN is simply saying that you log in to a network which is not your network. Like, so let's say if your provider is Comcast or WoW or AT&T Fiber or whatever that is, anything that you are going to do, like visiting a website, is now not going directly out to your service provider, but it's actually going to a network which you trust and then going out from there. So in a way it's secure because you now are bound to that VPN infrastructure rules and regulations, and it could have certain firewalls that protect your activity. So so I think it's as good as, so when you use a VPN, it's as good as what their policies are and how they're protecting when you're visiting sites using that particular VPN network. So if it's your business network, then again you're bound to using their rules. If you try to visit a site that's compromised, you won't be able to because it could have blocked. But in reality, it's very tough to find spoofing. I mean, obviously through VPN is actually a better way, because like I said, on your computer you may not have that infrastructure to protect you, versus through a VPN network, which they may have that particular investment to provide you that protection. But spoofing and all of that, you still have to be very careful, because these are constantly changed and are attacked from different networks that your VPN provider may not be up to date and may not have that information. But the other thing is, it's quite better. So if you're on vacation and you're outside, now you're relying on someone else's network, like your hotel network or any other network that you're on, or maybe in a cafeteria like Starbucks or somewhere. You're relying on public Wi-Fi, which means that it's opening up to someone to eavesdrop on the traffic. So if you use a VPN, then you're making sure that the traffic is going through them. So in a way that protects you. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Sujal. So the next one we have is, when a website is under DOS attack, what are the next steps?
So when the website is under DOS attack, the one thing that you could do is identify what are they trying to access. First of all, you first can look at the logs and look at where these attacks are coming from. So if you can isolate the traffic, so let's say if it's coming from a particular country or a particular zone that you can block, then your IT team can actually block through the firewall, block any traffic that's coming in temporarily from that area. In other cases, if it's a sophisticated attack, it could mean that the attack is coming actually from various computers all over, like different networks. And once that's happening, it's very difficult to block all the traffic, right? Because it's coming from different areas. So at that time, you want to look at the signature and see, like, okay, what exactly are they trying to get to? And this is where the intrusion prevention helps, because it can actually look at that signature and see that, hey, all of this traffic seems to be someone who is trying to attack, and it can cleverly just block that. And the information that comes in, your regular traffic is not affected. So I would say, like, blocking the traffic, if you can identify the zone that it's coming from, and in the firewall just block that particular traffic, in this particular case, the IP address, let's say, or a zone of IP addresses. If you can identify them, block traffic from that would be one. The other thing would be, like I said, if it is happening through that, temporarily moving it. If it's an attack just on the server, then you could possibly move it to a different network. But if it is a attack on the website, which is through the URL, then it's very important to identify the signature and mitigating traffic that's coming in from those IP addresses, because unfortunately it's an open door. So anyone I guess it's an open door, so anyone can try to get in. So you have to identify who you block while you let some genuine traffic to come through.
Great. Let's see. So this next one is, during a ransomware attack, unlike a large scale like Gasline ransomware, where federal teams are involved to resolve the issue, what if it happens to a small website or just a private computer? What are the next steps for that?
I think one thing, if you can, is to directly inform your local police, local regulatories, to identify, like, hey, something like this has happened. The other thing is, if possible, to turn off that computer if it's your personal computer, and not use that, and isolate the traffic. So in the sense, like, turn off the Wi-Fi or the network that you're in. And typically, if it is something that you can do, it's advisable not to pay, because it simply encourages them to do this. But when you contact your your local authorities, they will inform the FBI and any other regulatory bodies that need to get involved, and they will help you out. But usually when this happens, it's very, very difficult to get your files back unless you actually, unfortunately, pay them and get the keys. But if you have followed the right policies and protocols, and if you're backing up your data regularly, which you should. So if you have any kind of secure data, you should make sure that it's in a few places and possibly encrypted as well. So you get local encryption softwares that you can install on your computer as well. So you can use your own encryption to encrypt files and folders. And how that works is basically on your own computer, you need a key to open your files that you want to see. So it's not just regular file folders that you click on open and you can view them. But basically, these are softwares that will encrypt and decrypt the files as you put things into it. So if there is a compromise, they are encrypting already encrypted data. So literally, you haven't lost anything, or even if they had shipped that data to their servers, they can't make much out of it. So, you should probably look into those softwares that you can find and install on your computer and secure the personal folders that you think you need and are secure.
All right, that looks like we wrapped it up with a few questions there. Thank you, Jada, for your assistance. And thank you, Sujal, for sharing your knowledge and experience on today's topic.
Thank you, Dave. No, I'm thankful for this opportunity. It's something that we should always pay attention to, and hopefully, you found this information valuable, and it will help you understand and possibly plan ahead on how you can be better protected.
Awesome. Thanks again, Sujal, and a huge thanks, of course, to all of you for registering and listening in to find out more about website security. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.